Welcome back to the Paths Less Traveled on the Be Schooled podcast. Today we are talking about a path that takes insider knowledge of the elite finance world and turns it into an entrepreneurial success. I'm joined by Patrick Curtis, the founder and CEO of Wall Street Oasis, a platform that has reached millions of finance professionals over nearly 2 decades. Patrick started his career on a traditional path, investment banking at Rothschild, followed by private equity, before getting his MBA at Wharton and building Wall Street Oasis. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Really appreciate you having me. Thanks so much.
So, I want to start talking about your career pre-MBA. You
Sure.
were already living the dream for many of our listeners, right? IB analyst at Rothschild, moving into private equity. That is the stated dream career path for a lot of our MBAs and pre-MBAs. Why did you step off to get your MBA at Wharton?
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that while, looking back a long time ago, 20 years, my first step was very difficult in terms of even just landing the role in investment banking at Rothschild because I was graduating in 2002, right into the dot-com burst and right after 9/11. And so I felt very fortunate to land that first role. It was one of my last interviews. I struck out at a whole bunch of interviews kind of leading up to that. And then more importantly, my transition to private equity was even rockier. So I actually got fired from my first private equity job within a few months. So not all rainbows and everything wasn't going perfectly right out of the gate. So um, I think that experience of losing my role pretty early on was one of the reasons that I was a little bit more open to building something on the side to almost protect myself. And there was a little bit of insecurity probably around having those struggles early on in my career because I think you go in a little bit naive when you're 22 years old of if I work hard, everything's going to take care of itself. When it doesn't take care of itself, there's a little bit of you're looking over your shoulder for the rest of your career. So in terms of just answering the question of why go get my MBA, it's also one of those things that really I feel like raises the floor to your entire career. So it may not mean that you're going to be the CEO of the next Fortune 500, but it usually means with the network you build and with the knowledge you build, you're going to almost without fail have a decent career and a good job where you can raise a family and have that security. So I think it was probably in terms of my decision when I did end up getting back into private equity when I was there and trying to decide what's my next step. The MBA felt very natural to me because I still had that fear. Had already kind of started building Wall Street Oasis on the side, and I said, well, this will also give me time to see is this entrepreneurial thing something real, and it'll also give me that insurance and some upside, but also that really for me it was more like it's going to give me that safety of that really strong network so that I know if something like that ever happens to me again, I can fall back on that and still have something. So that was like probably the main impetus or main reason.
Okay, so you started building WSO pre-business
Pre-MBA,
school. Okay.
yes. And it was tiny. It
Yeah, I
was
mean,
tiny. It was very small. It wasn't like a business, so to speak. It was the
yeah,
online community. So yeah.
fun little side gig,
Yeah,
side
exactly.
hustle, as we call them now.
Yeah.
I think you said so many interesting things. Like, I think a lot of times when people are looking at their career, they trust that big company that might hire them to give
Mhm.
them security more than they trust themselves. And for you to have that kind of shakeup early on maybe showed you it's not always what it seems, and like investing in yourself and empowering yourself is a good move.
Yeah, and I think also part of it was just in my first few years out of school at Rothschild, the hours were very long. And it was a tough first few years out of school in the sense of relationships with friends and family and all those things. It was very much like you give your whole life to this role right out of school. And I think part of me also looked and thought, is this the life I want long run. And so
Hmm.
it's kind of one of the reasons why I did transition to the buy side. I said, I need to try something new after 2 years. I need to figure out, is this really what I want to do? Investing sounded really interesting and exciting. And by the way, I loved private equity. I thought it was super interesting meeting different entrepreneurs and all this stuff. And I never thought of myself like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't like dreaming of this. It was just more of like, it really was this, hey, I should be doing something else just to
Hmm.
see if I can do this. Not so much of like, I have this grand vision of what Wall Street Oasis was going to become. It was more of like, let me just try something and start something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I mean, it was the same with me. I think that's so often, you find a need through your own experiences and you kind of
Hmm.
play around with it and wow, other people share that need. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you don't have to like hustle and work really hard to br bring it to fruition.
I always say
So,
I was working, 90 hours a week or so at Rothschild. And then when I went to private equity, I was working only about 60 hours a week. I felt like I was on vacation. So building a business on the side after hours was just getting me back to where I was.
oh
It was,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah. No.
Um, okay, so you go to Wharton, you focused
Yeah.
specifically on entrepreneurial management. Um, Coming from finance, it's like a structured world. What were some of the mental shifts or sort of aha moments that you experienced at business school that really prepared you to build up your own company?
Yeah, well, I think what investment banking and private equity give you that's incredible is just really good, obviously financial modeling. You have really good sense of, profit margins and business and product mix and all these things that are really good at a, analytical level. But where I was particularly weak was probably just on like marketing, understanding just like strategy and business in general. And so it really kind of rounded out my profile in the sense of like just being in those marketing classes, understanding like any of this even meant, how to look at different business models differently was, I think, really important. Um, I still feel like um, my classmates at Wharton like accelerated the the business probably by like 5 years in my first year at Wharton. So just having really smart people around you that have worked in ad ops or have done any sort of vertical advertising networks and even understanding what that was early on allowed me to start bringing in enough revenue to be able to reinvest back into the business. So like if I hadn't gone to Wharton, I probably like WSO wouldn't be where it is today. But more importantly, I probably would have. Who knows if it would have even survived? And so I think the entrepreneurial management classes and the marketing classes and all these things were great, but really the classmates,
Mhm.
like we were using WSO as projects in these classes. And then on top of it, there was like venture initiation program where I got like access to other entrepreneurs that could guide me. And so like there was a big support network there for entrepreneurs. And I thought it was amazing resources, amazing support from both the school itself, but also my classmates. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I mean, I think, that's why it's different from just reading a business book because it's the classroom discussion, the conversations you have over coffee afterwards, the brainstorming, the, stopping in a professor's office. Like it really is the human element that makes it such a very, very special time. And I think what you said about entrepreneurship, people say, how can I learn entrepreneurship in business school? And to me, being an entrepreneur early on means you're doing everything.
Yeah.
So you need to know finance, accounting, strategy, marketing, HR, like going to business school and just learning all of those little buckets kind of prepares you for the real deal. So,
Yeah, and just people being willing to talk about your business over and over and over again. Like your parents or your friends may not want to hear about it, but like these people are all usually all passionate about business. They're actually really interested in hearing about it and want to help you. So it's just like you can find people that are willing to talk about it over and over and over again, different problems, and try to help you um, solve those difficult problems. So I think it's an amazing environment.
agreed. Agreed. So, okay. you graduate Wharton, you've built WSO over nearly 20 years into one of the largest online communities for finance and consulting in the world. Um, what was your vision kind of in those early years?
Yeah, nothing to what it is now. I think initially, when I was launching WSO, it was really trying to create a community, trying to create a place where people could go to learn more about industries that were at that stage pretty opaque. So if you went to the right schools or you went to the right or were part of the right club, it was a little bit easier to understand what even private equity was. I didn't know what private equity was coming out of Williams. And Williams isn't some like complete no name. It's a liberal arts college, so I didn't have accounting, I didn't have finance courses. So yes, I had more to learn, but it was very surprising to me that when I was in investment banking, I had no idea kind of what my next step was. And I said, well, why am I like just so lost and floundering? There must be a lot of people like this. And so I thought, let's just start something simple. Let's just start like a online forum for bankers. So it actually was iBanking Oasis in the first year and a half or so before we changed the
Oh,
name, but so
okay.
way back in the day. And we tried to make it the angle that we took was when you're talking investment banking, most people take themselves pretty seriously. And so we took a different approach of let's have a little bit of fun with it. And, let's make our theme monkeys because of the famous book called Monkey Business. I don't know if you remember this book from way back in the
Oh,
day. That
okay.
was the origins of like they'd call the analysts monkeys. And so we were like, let's make it fun. Let's gamify it. Let's have bananas in the forums where people will get every time they contribute, they get points that way and they collect bananas and they can go up the rankings from monkey to chimp to monkey to King Kong eventually. And so this was just an angle we took simply because like it can be a very stuffy industry. And we wanted to kind of just go counter against that to try and make it a little bit just more entertaining, more fun. And we knew that a lot of college students would be coming on there because that's typically where like they're trying to get information of like what are they going to ask me in the interview, what's the pay really like, hey, is this group a good group that I actually want to go into? And
Hmm.
so that's kind of the approach we took, and I think that was one of the reasons that it did well, besides the timing. So 2006 was a time when obviously smartphones were starting to the iPhone had just come out. I think in terms of like search traffic, long tail search, if you just had like a lot of discussions with long tail search, you could rank pretty easily. This is very different from nowadays where
Oh,
it's like flooded. So
yeah.
forums that were, pretty well SEO optimized you could get good traffic to a random forum thread that your community created. So it was UGC. It was, mostly UGC and mostly just something that built steadily over the first few years. Yeah.
It's amazing how much things have changed
Yes, a lot.
in that time.
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of our listeners are actively trying to break into these roles. I'd love for you to share about the Wall Street Oasis Academy,
Sure.
and maybe what gaps are you seeing in traditional undergrad or grad career services that your program solves?
Sure. So Academy is kind of our most intensive program. It's a 12-week boot camp focused on placing students into elite careers like management consulting and investment banking, private equity. For our MBA students, typically we like to see them joining the program before they get on campus, simply because once you're on campus in the MBA, the recruiting is so accelerated that you're in coffee chats, you're in these cocktail hours, typically by September. And then, first rounds are done. First and final rounds are done in January, and typically it's all wrapped up by February of your first year. So the MBA is going in thinking, oh, I'm going to have time to explore and try to figure out what I want to do. It's very difficult for them if they, wake up October, November and decide, I think I want to do this banking thing, especially if they don't have any pre-MBA finance experience and they need to get caught up on the accounting, the LBO math, the technicals, all of that stuff. And then potentially they haven't built out the network as well. So what our program does, it kind of helps streamline the entire process of just obviously the training on the technicals, but more importantly is the story of making sure whatever they had done pre-MBA, it matches and it tells something that's compelling and authentic of why they want to specifically go to where they want to go. And so there's a lot of one-on-one work with our mentors that will make sure that their answers have that authenticity, have that personalization, make sure that it's resonating really well. And so the way we do that is we obviously work one-on-one to develop all that, but more importantly, we actually stress test it in mock interviews and score them across a bunch of different subcategories. We're making sure that they're scoring a certain level so that they know, hey, at this level, my odds of getting an offer are X, or this is my percentile relative to other MBAs. And so the program is really kind of closing a gap, mostly a lot for career switchers. So people who are or in corporate finance or in consulting and trying to get to banking or vice versa, they're trying to get to consulting. It allows them to kind of accelerate their preparation for the entire recruiting process. And so, yeah, the program is pretty intense, but it's something that I think does help move the needle and make sure that everything is kind of set up and uh, blocked and tackled prior to kind of the timing when it matters. Because the other thing about MBA recruiting for these top roles is typically once you're on campus, uh, the schools typically don't like you going outside and networking outside of these official windows. And so they'll sometimes say, hey, don't make sure you don't go do this. So there's kind of a window before you get on campus where you can do that and do it with a bit of you can be a little bit naive of like, oh, I'm just trying to explore and learn. And if you get 30, 40 calls done prior to even getting on campus at, the top MBB and the top banks and elite boutiques, you're at a huge advantage because then once the on-campus cocktail hours happen, you've met a few people. You're more likely to get pulled through to the first round because you made that effort kind of in the summer prior and in the spring prior. So that's kind of the program, but more importantly, like the timing of what matters. It doesn't mean that if you don't land an on-cycle summer associate role, like life is over. Like we've had second year MBAs come in, even post MBAs come in and still be able to make a transition. But that is when the window is widest. And so you do want to try and be ready for it.
I mean, it's such a rigorous, intense process that, like, I don't see how anyone can get through without crazy amounts of prep. It's just, it's
Yeah,
a
and
lot.
it's not that the schools don't have great resources. And you'll see like when I was there, I remember seeing like people trying to break into McKinsey or they would be locked into those rooms in Huntsman and just be like case. And that's what it takes. It's more of just a question of like the relationships you're building prior to the process that I think helps plant seeds that increases your odds of getting the first rounds in the first place in the first place. So it's like a lot of, when you think about getting any job, really it's two problems. One is getting in the room first and then just converting. And depending what school you go to, what MBA you're in, and like what your connections are like, sometimes you have more of a problem with that first step where like it's very hard for you to just get enough first rounds. And sometimes you're getting a lot of first rounds, but for whatever reason, something's not resonating. Your technicals are a little bit above average, but not exceptional. Your answers are good, but they're not as good as the other candidates. So you want to quickly try and diagnose where you're going to struggle. And sometimes it's like a struggle at each stage. You need to improve at both. Sometimes you're an amazing interviewer ready to go, but you're not getting enough first rounds to get that offer. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you go to HBS, maybe it's easier to get your foot in the door for the first round, but then your competition in your class is
right.
so intense. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah. And one of the things we see with MBAs in particular is the bar for behavioral is so high. Like the answers can't just be like oftentimes with the undergrad, if the behaviorals are like above average and they're good and they come across, they can sometimes still get through and get an offer. For MBAs, it's like you have to be so incredibly polished because you're 5 years, 7 years out of school. The expectation is so much higher and your competition speaks so much better. You've done speech, you've done debate, or you've done yeah. So it's a higher bar for those
Hmm.
MBAs. Yeah.
So, I mean, I've seen with my children that the undergrad recruiting into finance has changed so much. I'm curious,
Yeah.
how has banking and consulting, how has the recruiting changed over the last few years? The interview process, the barriers to entry, like how has it evolved?
Yeah, there's several kind of trends that we're seeing. So the first obvious one is just the acceleration of the timelines. So right now, in terms of for banking and even consulting is accelerated, but banking is even earlier for we're talking US here. By sophomore year, September, October, it's pretty expected that networking is going to start. And then RBC opened up sophomore year in September, and a bunch of other firms started opening in December sophomore year. So before you're halfway through, before you're done with your first semester sophomore year, applications are open at a handful of banks. And then by January 1st, they all open. And so in terms of timing, you're typically things are getting offers are going out early, mid-January, and then by end of February, call it 70, 80% of the process is done. End of March, it's 95% done. So it's very early.
And
This
that's for two
junior
summers
summer.
ahead.
Yeah, exactly. That's for 18 months for an internship, 18 months into the future. It's not a full-time job. This is an internship. So it's
When
just
you're supposed to be in college kind of exploring, like maybe you want to be a history professor.
exactly, exactly.
It's
And it's really unfortunate. I actually don't like it at all. I wish we had more time because then you can get kids coming. If we had another year, we could get kids coming in early junior year, and it wouldn't be too late. And it would be something where the window wouldn't have shut so much, and it wouldn't be such a disadvantage. All the early acceleration does is helps the kids who were told earlier. That's all it does. It just pre-selects the kids who were told about it earlier, who had friends or their family in it, or friends of friends that knew about it. So it's unfortunate. It's just a reality of what it is. Private equity recruiting has gotten even more insane. By senior year, if they know you have an IB job, they're interviewing you for a job over 2 years away. So
and so
that's just
what
to show
about
you
for
that,
MBA students? How
yeah.
has that
Yeah,
changed?
so good question. Yeah, so for MBAs, it has shifted earlier into the first year. So you'll see the cocktail hours and stuff. They will be going pretty early, and so you'll see sometimes the banks getting super days closer and closer to or first rounds in that first semester, end of first semester, rather than waiting until the new year, and then so they can do the final rounds soon after the new year, rather than waiting for the first rounds kind of coming in January and then February. So it's shifted much closer to the new year in terms of how that's changed. They can't really. There's been some kind of accelerated recruiting or diversity recruiting that's happened kind of into the summer prior, but it's less volume
It's like
than
dirty
than
rush.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate. I mean, for the MBAs, I don't feel as bad. No offense to the MBAs or MBAs because they kind of typically are a little bit older and have had more time to research all of this. I feel like for the undergrads who are 18, 19 years old, it's brutal because they're expected to they're expected to like do all this networking and relationship building, which feels very unnatural to them at that age oftentimes. And so they have to grow up pretty fast. And what I always say is to students that like miss these windows is in the moment, it can feel so devastating and so horrible if like you wake up in your second year of your MBA and you realize, well, wait a second, I wanted to do management consulting, I wanted to do banking, and you realize like, well, that recruiting window is closed. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
it just means that the path may take a little bit longer. You may not get it right out of school. And same thing for the undergrads. Sometimes there's half steps you can take to get you closer or keep you in the same what I call channel of that specific role. So for example, if you're late, you get a semi-target, you have a 3.7 GPA, you're like just a very middle of the road candidate, but you're late, but suddenly you realize I really want this. You can still work your way into like a deal advisory role at a top, at a big four or a Deloitte or something that keeps that window open. And if you become really good at networking and suddenly if rates ever get cut and suddenly deal volume picks up and you've been talking to like 70 people in the last 3 or 4 months that are and you're happen to be in the city, you're probably going to get a lateral interview, and if you're ready you can absolutely get it. So it's one of those things where it feels very devastating, especially to a sophomore, of like I didn't do it, and they see all their friends posting to LinkedIn, I thank you so much for all the support and I did it, and it can feel really devastating for someone young. And I always say like careers are long and habits are what matter long run. And so if you're developing the right habits at 20 years old, 19 years old, of I'm going to network when I don't need anything. I'm just going to be really good at developing relationships with people and forget about the near term job I have. Because the reality is, um, if you're good at your job, if you're a hard worker, if you're kind to people, if you are good at building relationships, you will absolutely start getting promoted and start in being able to lateral or transition to other roles and get promotions. That's what's going to matter long run in terms of your trajectory. So Like I try to calm some of our students if they're panicking. I'm like, this is such a long road. And so we try to teach them the habits that really and show them like open their eyes of what's possible if they put in the work kind of day in, day out and stay consistent with it.
Yeah, and that networking without like wanting anything, I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a lot of what B School is about. You're just meeting this incredible pool of people. You don't know where they're going to be or what they're going to be doing, but you're
Yeah.
forming great relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, rewind a minute. 3.7 in college is middle of the road.
Well, it depends if there's grade inflation at whatever school you're at. So if you're at Princeton or Cornell, no, you're amazing, like, right? But if you're at a, a school that like that's the average and you're trying to get to these lead roles, you're kind of, yeah, 3.6, 3.7, whatever. It's still good. But my point is, um, yeah, my point was just that recruiting itself, this whole game of like the networking especially can feel super transactional. And so these kids know I have to get this number of calls to get this number of first round interviews to have a chance.
Yeah,
Or like I'm at the MBA and I have to go to these cocktail hours and schmooze and like it's stressful for these people. Like what do I ask them? How do I dress? How should I behave? And so I think point being like that's all fine and good. You want to play the game as best to your ability to try and get that offer. But really the skill set of building those relationships and making somebody like you outside of that crazy context of a recruiting cycle is really like the skill set that matters long run, I
yeah.
think, in terms of like where you go. So um, like those soft skills are hard to teach. They're hard to teach. And so we try our best with it. We have networking boot camps. We have like advanced networking boot camps, foundational ones, and we have we're scoring people on authenticity, not just speech. So they get really kind of a sense of, hey, this is what matters, and it's going to hurt their score if they sound like a robot. They've memorized all their answers, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, sounds like an amazing program.
thank you,
So,
thank you.
okay, so a huge percentage of our audience is a great fit for the academy. They want to pivot, they want to use the MBA to pivot into finance from a very non-traditional background. Um, so I think you're saying that pivot is viable, but love
Absolutely,
to hear
yeah.
that
The
from
MBA
you. And
people
then
leverage the MBA all the time for
what's
that.
the
Yeah, yeah.
timeline? Like, what's a realistic timeline for these people?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you're prepping before you get on campus. If you have, if you come and start prepping September, it doesn't mean it's like you can't catch up. But I think if as it gets further, like if you're going into these coffee chats and these cocktail hours, call it September, October, and you haven't started working on your technicals or done any networking, or it's going to be very difficult to compete, especially if you're coming from like you're a pivot and you didn't have any finance background. Just because there's
So
like basic.
so
Yeah.
we're in middle
We're
of
in
July. There are
we're in
people
July. I would love to just start now. Yeah, just start now. Yeah.
like what should they be doing? Like today,
Yeah.
they hear this podcast. What?
Financial modeling training right out of the gate. So make sure you know how to link the three statements. You know your accounting. You know your LBO modeling. You understand valuation questions, accounting question, interview questions. Have that foundation. Like start building that foundation and that technical knowledge now. Because you don't want to have to cram it when the interviews start. And secondly, now before you get on campus where they try to lock you down, start talking to people in the industry. So it means this what we do with our students is like send out 100 connection requests every single week. That'll turn into 20 to 30 new connections, and that'll
And
turn
do you
into
find those on LinkedIn? Like,
LinkedIn. Yeah, just search MBAs that want the MBA you're going to. Find them. Hey, I'm headed to Wharton. I'm headed to Darden, wherever you're going. I'm headed to Columbia, and I'd love to just pick your brain in terms of like how this. I've never done this. I saw you ended up in investment bank or private equity, and I've never done this type of thing. I'd love to just have a 10-minute chat. From
so
in
a
terms of numbers,
hundred outbound
yeah,
emails, how many calls will that
great
like?
question. It looks like this. It's about 100 new connection requests. So not even an email leads to about 20 to 30 new connections, which will lead to about 3 to 5 phone calls. Maybe
Which
a
is
little.
so great to hear
Yeah.
because,
You're rejected
people are like,
95%
they
of the
didn't
time is normal.
reply. I
Yeah.
sent out three, contact. No
Yeah.
one replied. No, send out 100. Maybe then you'll get a
Yeah.
few.
And guess what? Those numbers are with follow-ups. So that's not a number of like where people are just hopping on the phone with you. That's with follow-ups. So it's a little bit higher for MBAs. Actually, it's closer to 30 to 40% acceptance rate if you say I'm going to that MBA, and then it tends to be closer to 10% of that group will get on a call, 10 to 15%. So it's a little bit better because you're more professional. You're not like as green as like an undergrad. Those other numbers were a little bit more skewed toward undergrad, but point being, you're still getting rejected 90% of the time,
Yeah.
or
So
ignored.
it's good to just know that, get used to
Yeah,
it. That's
it's
life.
just that's just life, and it's still super valuable. If even if you can only get on 15, 20 calls before you get on campus, those 15 to 20 calls, I can almost guarantee you one of those will like pay off big when recruiting starts, especially if
Mhm.
you make a good impression, ask good questions when you get on those calls.
Love it. Okay. So looking back, you're like 20 years, nearly 20 years post Wharton.
Yeah.
Um, how would you say that the degree has impacted you through the years and even now?
Yeah.
Career,
So I think,
personal, everything.
yeah, I think in terms of just the way I look at problems and the way I look at like how to solve things and business models, it absolutely just changed my entire framework of how I approach things. And so while I was on campus, it provided a tremendous amount of near-term value in terms of like helping the business accelerate, getting me to the point where I knew I didn't have to go recruit and I could actually do this full time. To the point where I halfway through, almost like right before my first year, I on purpose did not recruit to force myself to like really hone in and see if I could do this. And then by the end of my first year, I said, I'm good. Like I'm at a stage where I don't even have to go back. And then when I
So
graduated, I went down.
you didn't do a summer internship or you did?
I worked on the business 100%. So I did not do a summer internship. And during that, by the end of that summer, I knew like I'm going to be okay when I graduate. I was able to move to Argentina for a year, travel with my remote business and unbelievable like opportunity to just have freedom. And so point is, it gave me a lot of near-term value, but the long-term value was really more, I think, around the frameworks it taught me in terms of how to think through problems, how to look at a business through different lens. And it allowed me to, even though I feel like there were a lot of missed opportunities, a lot of mistakes I made along the way, it allowed me to continually tweak and iterate to the point where, with launching the mentor service in early 2010s, launching interview courses, eventually launching financial modeling training, eventually then academy. So like all these things like wouldn't have happened, I feel like, without the MBA and that framework of like how to look at different things. And then by the way, some of my classmates did amazing things, Warby Parker, Harry's. I was sitting next to these incredible people right next to it. And so it's just you know,
Amazing.
I feel
Yeah.
very yeah, I feel very
I
lucky.
know. I go back to my business school reunions and I'm kind of amazed at how well the admissions committee really hacked it and put together an incredible class. And
Yeah,
people are doing so well.
yeah,
So it works.
it
The
does.
admission, they pick great people, they put them into this environment of learning and connecting and churns
Yeah.
out some,
And Stacey, I think it's really interesting the decision MBA or not, because I think there's a lot of finance people, specifically like investment bank or private, a lot of them sometimes will look at things on a pure numbers basis of opportunity cost versus this because they're making so much outside and it's a difficult decision. I think it's really interesting. There's a famous user on WSO called Comp Bank. He was like one of the top users of all time, has a lot of silver bananas, and he very knowledgeable. He was anti-MBA for a long time, but then ended up going and getting his MBA, and he said it was the right decision because there was a lot of value. It's very hard to quantify on a piece
yeah.
of paper, and it has paid off huge for him in terms of dividends. And so I think it's hard to quantify, not just the relationships and the experience you get from being there for 2 years, but just the mental frameworks and the way you start looking at different things and the different perspectives you get within the classrooms from people from all different regions, but then all different types of careers as well is I think invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, you said in the beginning of our conversation that the MBA kind of raises the floor. I think
Yeah,
that's how you phrased it. And I
yeah,
do think it's true. Someone might be pre-MBA thinking, I'm making this much, and when I graduate MBA, I'll do this and I'll make this much, so it doesn't pay off. But what you don't realize is that you get into that ecosystem, and
Yeah.
what you think you're going to do completely explodes, like
Yeah. And
grows.
changes, like you didn't realize, oh, wait, I thought I was going to do investment banking and I only did that for 2 years, but then I went and worked for a family office over here that I wouldn't even known what that is or how to even meet with those people or how to, right? So there's just like so many other niche sub careers, many things, semi-entrepreneurial things that you don't even know, you know, connection to investors that you wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's hard to know going in what it's going to do for you in even just a few years out. I mean, we see this like in terms of career changes, like people have a plan in their mind of like, I'm going to get this X, Y, or Z return. And sometimes it changes. And sometimes the return comes massively later,
Hmm.
7 years later after the MBA, and it changes their tune a little bit. So yeah, I'm a big believer. It's been great for me. I think Wharton supported me at an extraordinary level while I was there, but then also just all the alumni cohort. We still have a chat, a WhatsApp chat with all cohort L.
Same.
And
Yeah.
it's great to kind of still hear from everybody, and yeah, I think it's been great for me.
Very cool. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for joining me. To our listeners, if you're targeting an elite career in finance or consulting, make sure to check out Wall Street Oasis and their academy. We'll definitely drop links in the show notes. And thank you for listening to B Schooled.
Thanks for having me, Stacy. Appreciate it.